Hello, everybody. Welcome to another class on Web Yeshiva. I'm David Sedley. We're talking about Haggadot in their time, and today we're going to speak about the Maxwell House Haggadah. Now, before I start, I want to mention this class is dedicated in honor of Rabbi Chaim and Miriam Brovin with tremendous gratitude by Beth and Mark Epstein. They've dedicated all the classes today, so that's amazing. Thank you, and they should receive much blessing. Okay, Maxwell House Haggadah. If you are an American, you probably think of this as the Haggadah. If you're not American, perhaps you haven't heard of it. But it is by far the most printed Haggadah in history, and possibly has done more to shape American Orthodox liturgy than any other document. And so I want to look at that tonight and see where we get to. So Maxwell House Haggadah, over 60 million Maxwell House Haggadahs have been printed, making the most widely used Haggadah in the world. That means there's like 3 Haggadahs for every Jew in the world, which is crazy. You can still order one today. If you don't have, you can order the latest 2025 edition. If you go to Joseph Jacobs Advertising, it's free, but you do have to send $3 for shipping and handling. Now, this is not advertisement for them in any way, but I think it's amazing that, I guess I didn't even know they were still making them, and it's amazing that it's still free. I think on Amazon also, you can order it. If you buy a Maxwell House coffee product, you get a free Haggadah too. This Maxwell House Haggadah has been published every year since 1932, except for 2 years during World War II, when the United States was suffering from a paper shortage at the peak of its shortage around 1944. So that's almost 100 years of printing a new Haggadah every year, which is incredible. For Americans, this is the Haggadah, right? A kind of random blog. Amy Levitt says, of course my family used the Maxwell House Haggadah for our Passover Seder's when I was growing up. Why wouldn't we use the Haggadah that was available in the supermarket for free? Yes, it was printed on cheap paper that absorbed grease and wine and grape juice stains. Yes, the illustrations were terrible. Yes, it was written in pretentious faux King James Bible style that was incomprehensible even to full-grown adults, let alone children who were just struggling to master modern English. But it was, and I cannot emphasize this enough, free, which is an important consideration if you're trying to supply 9 or 10 or more people with liturgical guidance. Somehow a free booklet from the supermarket became our family tradition. This is her tradition, but this is every Orthodox American family's tradition, and even non-Orthodox to a certain extent. And when President Barack Obama hosted a Seder in the White House, which he did for I think 7 years, they used the Maxwell House Haggadah because, of course, they used the Maxwell House Haggadah. That is the American Haggadah. So I was thinking today, I spoke about manuscripts, I spoke about illustrated. I was going to speak about the earliest printed Haggadah, but I thought rather than that, let me talk about the most popular printed Haggadah in history. Of the, 4,000 more Haggadot that have, various editions of Haggadot that have been printed, none of them come close to in fact, almost any Jewish book. How many Jewish books have had 60 million copied, printed, and they're printing another 1 million copies every year of this Maxwell House Haggadah. So I've got 3 questions, but there'll be more. How did Maxwell House coffee, again, if you're not American, you won't know this, but Maxwell House was, up until the 1980s, the most popular brand of instant coffee in America. Very well-known brand. So how did Maxwell House coffee come to be associated with the Haggadah? How has the Haggadah changed over the years, and how do those changes reflect the changing dynamic in American Jewry? And I guess up front, I'll say I couldn't find anywhere online after a whole day of searching. I couldn't find a full Maxwell House Haggadah earlier than 1965. So I would have liked to have shown more changes and more evolution, but just look from 1965 to 2011, I think there's some significant differences we can talk about anyway. But if anyone has an earlier edition than that, I'd love to see it. Send me a PDF of it. So let's talk about Maxwell House coffee. You see her big stamp on the side, kosher LePesach, kosher for Passover. So where did Maxwell House coffee come from? What's going on? It's an American brand of coffee. Nowadays, it's manufactured as the Maxwell House division of Kraft Heinz in North America and JD Peet's in the rest of the world. Introduced in 1892 by wholesale grocer Joel Owsley Cheek, it was named in honor of the Maxwell House Hotel in Nashville, Tennessee, which was the first major customer. In other words, the name of the coffee is itself an advertisement, which is then used on a Haggadah as an advertisement. For nearly 100 years, until the late 1980s, it was the highest-selling coffee brand in the United States. The company's slogan is "Good to the last drop," which is often incorporated into its logo and is printed on its labels. And you see the logo there as a cup with the last drop, and that's still good. So it's a Tennessee coffee named after a hotel in Nashville. What's that got to do with Haggadot? So the OK, which gives the hechsher to Maxwell House coffee, their website says originally Maxwell House Coffee was named Cheek Neal Coffee Company after its founder Joel Cheek. Their unique selling proposition was to offer pre-roasted coffee beans. This was at a time when most people roasted and ground green coffee beans at home. Maxwell House is the name of a successful hotel in Nashville, Tennessee, that served the popular coffee to its guests. Due to popular demand from the hotel's patrons, Joel Cheek decided to brand his coffee as Maxwell House Coffee. This led him to take manufacturing to the national level. But in order to do so, they needed an entrance into the market and a solid marketing plan. So they turned to a Jewish advertising agent. Now, the Sforim blog, Mark Shapiro writes, I think it was him, that Maxwell House was not the first corporate-sponsored Haggadah. There were many before it. For example, the Westside National Bank Chicago sponsored one in 1919, printed in both Yiddish and English. Sometime in the 1920s, the American National Bank in Newark sponsored a Haggadah, which included the Hatikva and the Star Spangled Banner. That was a normal thing in Haggadahs in America. Numerous other banks sponsored Haggadahs throughout the 1920s. Post-Tim, a coffee substitute, put out its own Haggadah in 1935, and by then it was also part of General Foods' portfolio. And here are some examples. We have on the left the Lincoln Savings Bank of Louisville, Kentucky, put out their Haggadah Shel Pesach, and on the right we have the State Bank. I'm not sure where that's from. That came out in 1920, Haggadah Shel Pesach, and you see in Yiddish the State Bank. So other people were sponsoring Haggadahs before, but none of those still exist, and none of them are remembered today. And yet Maxwell House kept on going. So Maxwell House begins with the Maxwell House coffee, and the Haggadah comes from Joseph Jacobs advertising, and in fact Joe Jacobs himself. So on their website, Joseph Jacobs advertising, they say it all started with a man named Joe. He had this radical idea that a growing population of Jewish European immigrants represented a powerful market segment. Speak to them in their language and they will listen. Joseph Jacobs invented the idea of targeted marketing. First as an advertising manager at the Jewish Daily Forward, then as the principal of Joseph Jacobs Advertising. His agency quickly grew, and clients such as Colgate Palmolive Co., Maxwell House, and Quaker Oats Co. were promoting their brands to the Jewish customer. And you see on the side here an ad in Yiddish, right? Mitzvah aleinu lesaper. I can't read the small print. It says Maxwell House Coffee is kosher lePesach in Yiddish, which even if you don't speak Yiddish, right, you can understand that they're saying that it is kosher for Pesach. And the amazing thing is not only is Maxwell House coffee from the end of the 19th century, that's still going today. And the Haggadah that they sponsored starting in the 1920s is still going today. But the advertising agency, Joseph Jacobs Advertising, is still going today and is still selling these Haggadah. So it's really remarkable that all of these 100-year-old organizations, companies, and marketing people are still going 100 years later. I suppose you could say it's hashgacha. So I have not seen the TV show Mad Men, but that's set in the 1920s. It's talking about advertising. And Kerry Steinberg wrote a book called Jewish Madmen, talking about how advertising targeted and impacted the Jewish market. So she has a whole chapter on Maxwell House and Manischewitz, M&M as she calls them. Great, a really interesting book. I think I recommend it. So she writes that since 1919, the Joseph Jacobs organization has played matchmaker, pairing mainstream companies with the Jewish market. For 95 years, this agency has steadily guided ordinary household products into Jewish homes. Its list of achievements include the implementation of market segmentation to the Jewish community, being the first Jewish advertising agency to contract with major U.S. manufacturers, creation of the K symbol to designate kosher certification, creation of the OU symbol to designate certification by the Union of Orthodox Congregations of America. So they've really been very influential. I guess for people outside America, we kind of think a little bit that America is one giant advertisement and that advertisements shape America as much as the other way around. Anyway, so we see two ads here for Maxwell House from 1922. A man and a woman dressed, as 1920s flappers, drinking Maxwell House coffee, but the text is in Yiddish. This is targeting I guess the children of the European immigrants who came at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. This is the image of a young, upwardly mobile Jew who is discerning in his taste of coffee. And I guess I didn't put in all that many ads, but we'll see some cases of changing advertisements and a changing narrative of who should be drinking Maxwell House coffee. Now, the reason this was a particularly successful marketing campaign is because it was combating the question of, is coffee kitniot? So let's just back up and see what is kitniot, and then we can talk about if it is or it isn't. So the Torah says, right, as you know, Shivat Yamim. Oh, that is messed up, that Hebrew. I apologize. Shivat Yamim tochlu matzot. Matzot tochluach b'yom harishon tishbitu so mibadichem ki kolchem machmetzet. Nefashot miYisrael miyom rishon ad yom hashvi. Anyway, you can't eat chametz, right? You can't eat chametz, and chametz is produce made from, again, the Hebrew is messed up, I'm sorry. Chametz is the 5 grains which you can make matzah out of. If you make your matzah in 19 minutes instead of 18, it becomes chametz. So any product involving water, wheat, barley, spelt, rye, and oats can be used for matzah and can become chametz. And anything that does not include those 5 grains cannot become chametz. Now, this is not a shir on halacha of chametz and the halacha of kitniot, and I'm not going to get into whether oats is really what it is or anything else, but there's a thing called chametz. And then in addition, there's a custom about kitniot. Again, the Hebrew is so badly messed up. Anyway, so the Smach, Sefer Mitzvot Katan, written by Yitzchak ben Yosef of Korbai, who is one of the Balei Tosfot, the student of Rav Yechiel of Paris, so 13th century. He wrote a book going through the 613 mitzvot, and somebody called Peretz of Korbai, I don't know who he is, he wrote a marginal gloss on mitzvah 222, saying, Al kitniot kegon poha upuli v'reish adashim v'kiyotze behen. Beans, like fava beans, rice, lentils, right? Rabbatenu noagim behem isur. Shelo le'ochlam b'Pesach klal. Our rabbis made a custom, they have a custom not to eat them at all during Pesach. Dvash noagim bo ha'olam isur mi'mei chachamim ha'kadmonim. And this custom not to eat, the prohibition not to eat kitniot, goes back to the ancient times, goes all the way back. We don't actually have, as far as I know, have an earlier source for this. We know that, for example, the Rambam makes no mention of a prohibition of kitniot, who lived in the 12th century, and that he talks about eating rice on Pesach, and the Gemara discusses two kinds of rice and whether they can become chametz or not. But certainly to say that beans can't be eaten on Pesach is only an Ashkenazi, well, predominantly Ashkenazi custom, and doesn't seem to go back all that far, even though the Smak says, Sefer Mitzvot Katan says it goes back, to the ancient, to the really old days. So we have this prohibition of kitniot and beans. Now, we're going to say that coffee is made from beans, and that's going to be the problem. Just to say, why do we have this mitzvah of kitniot, minhag of kitniot? And again, I wish the Hebrew wasn't so messed up. So the Mishnah Berurah gives 3 reasons. Right, the Smak doesn't give it; he just says that's a decree. The Chafetz Chaim says Yesh Osrim lo mikar hadin hu ela chumra she'echmira aleihem. The concept of kitniot is not a halacha, but it's a chumrah. U'mesayim lekamei v'tam chumrah zo. The reason for this chumrah is mishum shlefamim tevuah me'urav b'minei kitniot. Sometimes there's wheat or other of the 5 grains mixed in with the kitniot. V'yivshar lever yafeh, and you can't separate them, you can't sift them properly. V'ata li'idei chimutz and so then if you bake or cook them, you will have proper chametz. So one reason he suggests for the stringency of kitniot is that you may have some real chametz mixed in with that, which will cause you real problems. Second reason, this wasn't messed up on my I don't know why it looks like this. I don't know if it's because of the new WebEx or something else.
It is. All the other presenters are having the same issues.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. That doesn't make me feel any better at all, but at least it's not my fault. Appreciate that. So another is the odd shekama pa'amim tochanin ha'orez usham minei kidniot lekemach. Also, sometimes they grind up the rice and beans into a flour. Kama pa'amim ofin gankem min lechem. You can make bread out of rice or out of beans. Ve'ika hedyotot v'amearetz tuva shelo yavchinu ben kemach zeh lekemach sheminei dagan. Some people aren't smart enough to recognize the difference between flour made out of rice or beans and flour made out of wheat or barley. So they'll get confused. Right? Ubein pat lepat sheminei dagan. They won't know this bread is made out of rice and this bread is made out of wheat. Ati la kule gamba pat. They think if you can eat bread made of rice, they'll come to eat bread made out of wheat as well. And therefore the rabbis, the people, the custom came to prohibit all bread and any cooked dish, even cooking whole rice or whole beans. Once you made a decree, that decree applies across the board, even if the reason for it doesn't apply in that case. So no, thanks, right? V'od, third reason, dilma nimtza behem garanim shaminei dagan v'kanal, and also first reason again, maybe you'll find grains mixed in with the kitniot. So Ashkenazim, generalizing, Ashkenazim in general don't eat kitniot. Most Sephardim do, but some Sephardim, different communities, some don't eat rice, some don't eat other kinds of kitniot. And then we get into the question of what is included in the prohibition of kitniot. And this is a long-standing problem. It's been going, discussions happened for hundreds of years and got even stronger nowadays. What is it only beans? Is it only things that could be made into wheat? Is it only things that they said in Europe were kitniot, but not new foods? What about quinoa? What about sunflower seeds? There's a whole range. This is not a shiur on kitniot, but just to give you a flavor, beans are kitniot, and therefore coffee is made out of coffee beans, and you might think it is kitniot. So I just want to talk about when did coffee, right? People have had beans for a very long time. but coffee is a more recent invention, at least in Europe, where this is the issue. So drinking coffee dates back centuries in Ethiopia and later Yemen. It was already known in Mecca in the 15th century, and also in the 15th century, Sufi monasteries in Yemen employed coffee as an aid to concentration during prayers. So the Sufis are drinking coffee, that becomes part of their religious ritual. However, coffee later spread to the Levant in the early 16th century. It caused some controversy on whether it was halal in Ottoman and Mamluk society. So they had, not the same, but a similar machloket about whether coffee is kosher or not, whether coffee is halal. Then coffee arrived in Italy in the second half of the 16th century through commercial Mediterranean trade routes, while Central and Eastern Europeans learned of coffee from the Ottomans. By the mid-17th century, it had reached India and the East Indies. So Europeans and rabbis were discussing whether coffee was A, kosher, but B, kosher for Pesach, all the way back to the 16th, 17th century. I do not know that, Michael. I don't know if that's your April Fool's Day or if that's a real thing that you have heard, but sure. Coffee houses were established in Western Europe by the late 17th century, especially in Holland, England, and Germany. One of the earliest cultivations of coffee in the New World was when Gabriel de Cleur brought coffee seedlings to Martinique in 1720. These beans later sprouted 18,680 coffee trees, which enabled its spread to other Caribbean islands such as Saint Domingue and also to Mexico. And by 1788, Saint Domingue supplied half the world's coffee. Since early 1800s, Brazil has supplied the majority of the world's coffee. Anyway, the point is that this is not a new. This is not like coming to America and saying is turkey kosher. No one's ever seen a turkey before, or saying is quinoa kosher for Pesach. No one's ever seen a quinoa before. Coffee was something that had been discussed for hundreds of years. So the question is whether or not it is kitniot. So is it or isn't it kitniot? Wikipedia tells me that coffee comes from coffee beans. The coffee bean is the seed from the coffea plant, and the source of the coffee, it is the pit inside the red or purple fruit. This fruit is often referred to as coffee cherry, and like the cherry, it is a fruit with a pit. This is, I don't know who wrote this Wikipedia page, but it's very circular. Even though the coffee beans are not technically beans, they are referred to as such because of the resemblance to true beans. The fruits most commonly contain two stones with their flat sides together. A small percentage of cherries contains a single seed called a pea berry. Pea berries make up only around 10 to 15% of all coffee beans. It is fairly common belief that they have more flavor than normal coffee beans. Like Brazil nuts, a seed, and white rice, coffee beans consist mostly of endosperm. So they are definitely not a bean botanically, but they look like a bean, and they're called a bean. Now, here's what they look. Why can't I turn the page? I don't know. This is what they look like when they're the cherry. This is the fruit, the coffee fruit at the top, and inside, if you cut it in half, we see the bean inside, the unripe, immature bean inside the coffee cherry. And a coffee tree averages from 5 to 10 meters in height. They're 16 to 33 feet. As the tree gets older, it produces less fruit, loses pest and disease resistance. Coffee beans come from the seeds which are contained in fruits from trees and shrubs naturally grown in African forests. Humans produce coffee by roasting, grinding, and brewing the green coffee beans. So a bean, the kind of botanical definition of a bean, is something that grows underground, I think, right? That except for potatoes, which are not kitniot. But beans, either underground or perhaps like peas, they grow on small vines, plants close to the ground. But a tree that is 10 meters high is certainly not a bean, and the fruit it produces doesn't look anything like a bean. So it seems obvious, right? You would think that if somebody thought a coffee bean was kitniot, they were just making a mistake. They didn't bother looking on Wikipedia to see where coffee comes from, and they looked at what it looks like and see what its name is, and they just made a mistake. But in fact, it's not quite as simple as that. Yetiv Panim, Rikusia Yehuda Teitelbaum. Now, there were 3 or 4 rabbis with this name, one of whom became a Satmar Rav. One was this one, I think, is Rav of Sigit. The Rebbe is a Chassidish family. All the Teitelbaums are Chassidish, and many of the Rebbes are called Teitelbaum. And he wrote a commentary on the Chumash, and he wrote a commentary on, I can't remember what else, and he wrote a Haggadah. And in his Haggadah, which is called Yativ Panim, he writes, HaKafei atzomeach beganter, the coffee which grows in the gardens, he kitniot, it is kitniot. V'asur lishtot b'Pesach, and you can't drink it on Pesach. Kevan shegadal, I can't see what that word is. Bisharvitin, I think it grows in a pod, so it's demei lachadal. It's similar to mustard, she'asur mitam zeh, which is forbidden for this reason, kamosh katuv tori zahav, etc., etc. So he says he's not saying out of ignorance that he thinks it's a bean. He's seen the tree growing in the garden. He knows where it comes from, and even so, he's decided that this coffee bean is kitniot, even though it's nothing like a broad bean or a green bean or a chickpea. He's decided because it grows in a pod, it is kitniot. I must say, even though he's related to the Satmar Chassidim, the famous Satmar Rav did drink coffee on Pesach and talks about it in his Haggadah. So this chumrah of making coffee into kitniot, did not seem to stick around, certainly in America. Or in fact, anywhere. But so again, the idea that coffee might be kitniot does not come from ignorance, right? Not because I don't know where the coffee bean comes from, but rather that I see something in this coffee bean which makes me think it's like something which is kitniot rather than like a cherry which is not kitniot. And again, the definition of kitniot is, as Rav Moshe Feinstein was a very narrow definition. He said anything that wasn't forbidden by the Jews in Europe is not kitniot. So if we don't know that they didn't eat it, we can eat it. Others say everything is kitniot unless we know they did eat it in Europe. So all you can have on Pesach is potatoes. And then there's all sorts of views in between. Because it is a minhag and not a halacha, it depends on what people do, and therefore there's no, as much as people try and use their thumbs to try and figure out, according to Rambam, this is kitniot, and according to this is not for Pesach, but Rambam finds kitniot in terms of Orla and Shemitah. All of the kind of lumdus doesn't really make sense when you're talking about a minhag. So, yeah. Wait, I'm recording, right, Ezra? Good, okay. Anyway, so Yativ Panim certainly and others say that coffee is kitniot. The Chita. Thank you very much, Elisa. That is very interesting. I did not know any of that. Thank you, everyone. I invite everyone to read. If you can find where the chat is, which is hidden, look at the speech bubble at the bottom on the right, and you might be able to find the chat comment. That's really interesting from Elisa from WebYeshiva.org. So the Chidar, Chaim David Azulai, was originally from Baghdad, I believe, and he went to Jerusalem, and then he went around Europe raising money for yeshivas in Israel. And everywhere he went to the libraries and researched and looked at things. So he was both a great rabbi, and he wrote a dozen books. He wrote a lot. He wrote a commentary on Shulchan Aruch and many, many books. And he went to libraries and looked up manuscripts. And so even though he is Sephardi, and Sephardim don't, in general, care about kitniot, he was traveling around Europe and he had opinions on all sorts of things. So he says, Baram, this is so hard to read. Baram, Ma she'aya gaon Avram Brody, machmir gam be'kafe, shechshiva kitniot, right? The devar zeh. That's our kitniot. So regarding Rabbi Avram Broda, who was stringent and said that coffee was kitniot, the devar zeh yislach adon, may God forbid him. May God forgive him for this view. He who pre-eats feilan, because coffee is a tree; it comes from a fruit. Asher I think it's India and America. Shanim Ra'iti Ailan Amsterdam. I've seen this tree growing in Amsterdam in a garden, and so there's no question that fruit from trees is not kitniot. You should not be stringent about coffee. So says the Chida, I don't think he's made a mistake because he doesn't know that it's from a tree. Right? I don't think that's his mistake. Rak mishum she'eno nimtza. Just because it's not, they don't have it so much. There's not coffee around that much, and they don't think about it. The people don't realize that it's from a fruit from a tree, even though Rav Avram Brody must know. So if you say to them that coffee is not kitniot, they'll say, oh, so beans aren't kitniot, and they'll eat real beans. And that's why he was stringent about coffee. So we have two reasons why one might think coffee is kitniot. One is that it looks like mustard, or somehow similar to mustard, which is kitniot. And the other is that it's not kitniot, but people think it's a bean, and therefore they'll think that kitniot doesn't apply to beans. And despite that, the Chida rules that coffee is not kitniot. But we have serious opinions that say coffee is kitniot. So he says, Mikom makom, im harchua kafe kodem Pesach v'yesh lakil, afilu b'Ashkenaz, if they roasted the coffee before Pesach, even Ashkenazim can be lenient. V'ken ksava Rav Shvus Yankov, the Shvus Yaakov wrote the same thing, it's not kitniot. V'zlak Rav Chok Yaakov, but Chok Yaakov said it is kitniot, K'moshe B'Sefer Katan B'Yochay Yosef. So the Chida rules along with the Shvut Yaakov that it is not kitniot. And just in case you're wondering, who is Avram Saul Broda? He lives 1640 to 1717, born in Prague. Then he goes to Krakow. He ends up becoming the chief rabbi of Prague. Gets into a halachic dispute with Chacham Tzvi, Rav Tzvi Ashkenazi, who has very interesting views on kitniot, but I'm not sure that's what the dispute was about. People were taking sides for and against. He didn't want to be involved in Machlok, so he packed his bags, left Prague, moved to Mainz, set up yeshiva, then he moved to Frankfurt, found another yeshiva. He doesn't seem to have written any books himself, but many of his students became prominent rabbis. And this new system is very annoying. Now, I don't know why I seem to have skipped what I want to say. So Maxwell House Coffee. Maxwell House Coffee want to sell, or Joseph Jacobs advertising company want to sell Maxwell House Coffee to Jews on Pesach, because Pesach is the best time to sell to Jewish families, because everyone's there and everyone's going to, if you have it at Pesach, you'll keep having it all year long. So they want to sell to Jews on Pesach, but it might be kitniot. And Jews come to America, they're not sure if they can trust the kashrus of the coffee and certainly everything around Pesach. So Joseph Jacob goes to a rabbi. Now, this is a bit confusing. Some places I saw cite he was an unknown, like an anonymous or an unknown rabbi, or a rabbi of little stature. Other places said that it was Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Khan, and still other places said it was Bezalel. We will see him on the next slide. I forgot his name. So I don't know for sure who gave the original heter for Maxwell House to say that that coffee is not kitniot, but it seems, well, anyway. So Maxwell House adds, apparently touted the virtues and qualities of the coffee. It was kosher for Passover and packed under the supervision of Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Khan, as it had been in previous years, and was the only coffee for Passover approved by the rabbinical periodical Hapardes. So Maxwell House starts pitching to Jews and gets a heter in the 1920s, right? But 32 is when their Haggadah comes out. And we have here, this is Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch, his stamp saying he's gone to visit a factory and he said it is kosher for Pesach. Yeah, I mean, this is probably the Maxwell House. Their plant was in Hoboken, New Jersey, and this is probably a thing saying he's gone to visit this and certified it kosher for Pesach. Oh, I don't like the Judaism, but it may have been Bezalel Rosen, although one place I saw that he died before Max. Well, no, he died before the Haggadah. He was around when the coffee came out. They collaborated with him to endorse the product. With this, they could advertise a conventional product to kosher-keeping Jews in a meaningful way. He gave us Haskama for Jews to drink Maxwell House coffee on Passover. His name was even stamped on some of the ads, providing unmistakable assurance. Now, he is not a lightweight rabbi. He was born... These two photos are the same person, really. Not painting pictures, a photo. He was born in 1871 in Tarnopol. He was a descendant of the Shla, the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, Levi Horowitz. He studied under the author of Minchat Chinuch, whose name I can't remember, the Rabbi Tarnopol, and later on the Ktav Sofer. Ktav Sofer was the son of the Chatam Sofer. Their last name was Schreiber. So Moshe Schreiber became the Chatam Sofer, and then his son was Avram Shmuel, maybe, became the Ktav Sofer. So he received rabbinic ordination from his aforementioned teachers, as well as from the author of Shut Netes Shorek, which I don't know anything about. In 1901, he arrived in America. He was appointed rabbi at the Great Beit Midrash Shamayim, serving as the Jewish community of Romanian origin. He had response and literature prepared for print, but it was never published. So again, he's somebody who studied with the greatest rabbis in Europe. He's not an unknown lightweight rabbi, and he gave a hechsher to say that the coffee, that Maxwell House coffee was kosher for Pesach. So Maxwell House initially cornered the market on Pesach coffee, and that was great for them. So all the Jews who wanted to keep kosher for Pesach had to drink only Maxwell House coffee. Then, during the Depression, the local dime stores or grocery stores would have their own brands of coffee, and they'd be selling them for like 8 cents cheaper than the Maxwell House coffee and the other name brand coffees. So they had to come up with a new kind of plan to keep people drinking Maxwell House coffee during the Depression years. So they came out with their Haggadah, and I feel I've lost a slide somewhere. Anyway, so they came out with their Haggadah, sponsored the Haggadah, so that people would be seeing their advert as they're doing the Seder. One time it was being very Jewish. And now I want to look at the differences between the 1965 Deluxe Haggadah, which is the one my in-laws use, blue cover with kind of a Seder plate on it, and that the original 1932 Haggadah basically stayed unchanged. The cover changed, but the inside basically stayed unchanged until 1965, and then that was redone in 2011. And so I want to compare those last two, the 65 with the 2011 Haggadahs. Again, Jewish Madmen says, Maxwell House Coffee Passover Haggadah. We have this Haggadah with minimalist. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Oh, okay. With minimalist reductive forms in the world of art and design, challenge the classicism of the past. Noticeable visual change in the 1965 Haggadah demonstrated how Maxwell House Coffee, like the Menashevitz Company, followed the times. The 10 plagues are symbolized using simple graphic illustrations. I saw several people say that the original Haggadah had illustrations that were based on Renaissance artworks, but I couldn't find the actual pictures and I couldn't find the artworks they were based on. But it seems that they were more kind of old worldly, old school European. And now in the 60s, we're switching to kind of more stylized, simple pictures in this Haggadah, which, keeping up with the times, as it were. So the illustrations are more similar. And we have now, I've got some examples of how the illustrations then change from the simple line drawings to more realistic images in 50 years later. So you see on the left, you've got Rochatz, Karpas, and Yachatz, just two-dimensional images, and then in the more modern Haggadah, it's not on a white background, it's on a Seder plate, and you've got a realistic image there. Again, that matches up with kind of the art styles, changes in art at the time. We also have differences in instructions. So when you have the 10 plagues in 65, it just lists the 10 plagues. I didn't do a great job of showing that here. But in the 2011, it says on the slide, there are some instructions. To be clear, it says wash your hands here, cover this, uncover that, stand up, sit down. But here we have additional layer of instructions. At the mention of each plague, a drop of wine is removed from the cup. At the mention of each mnemonic, a drop of wine is removed from the cup. So we see that people need more help, more instructions, more reminders of what to do, as you know, in the 2000s than they did in the 1960s. We also have difference in the translation. The 1965 and earlier was much more kind of the King James Version translation. Blessed art thou, O eternal God, King of the universe, creator of the fruits of the earth. Not only is the 2011 one more modern English, but also takes out the sexist language, does not refer to God as male, but as non-gendered. So we have, blessed are you, our God, monarch of the universe, creator of the fruits of the earth. So same Hebrew, same blessing. You see the different font as well. Obviously, it's a more modern font. So that is a clear reflection of how the world has changed in those 50 years from a paternalistic male deity to a non-gendered, neutral language God, monarch of the universe. Also, here, again, we have, this is the Birkat HaMazon. So, blessed art thou, eternal, our God, King of the universe. O God, thou art our Father, King Almighty, etc. Whereas in 2011, we don't have God as a father, but rather, bless you, God, monarch of the universe, our almighty parental monarch. I mean, I'm all in favor of, non-specific, non-gendered language, but almighty parental monarch is a bit of a difficult way of saying a word that in Hebrew is our father. Anyway, so we see that change, even when it is not an obvious or simple change. Like, I'm all for changing the 4 sons to the 4 children, because banim could be either sons or children. But, it gets more complicated when you're talking about God as our father, as our parental monarch. I just put this in because, again, I love the word verily. We've lost our verily in 2011. But also, and I don't really know why they would have done this in the original Maxwell House, but if you look at the last line of the first, on the left of the first little piece of the 2 pages, all right, when it says the Chachamim Omrim, they translate as the doctors, however, say the days of your life. Right? Why did they decide that Chachamim are doctors when it's talking about the other rabbis, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Tarfon? So here, the newer translation, which by the way was done by a high school teacher in New Jersey. So here it says, the sages say the days of your life, right? And Chachamim is much more similar to sages than to the doctors. So I thought that was interesting. The transliteration has not changed, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, but I would have thought in many communities that I'm familiar with, in the 1960s, they were pronouncing things in Ashkenazis, and by the 80s and 90s and 2000s, they were pronouncing it more like modern Hebrew. So I would have expected a change from Manish Tanau Halayla Hazeh to Manish Tanah Halayla Hazeh. But no, they've kept the old pronunciation. Now, I don't know if that's because, was it too much bother for them to redo the transliteration? Was it too political to redo the transliteration? Or are people using Maxwell House Haggadahs for their Seder? They don't speak Hebrew, modern Hebrew, old Hebrew, and this is what they're comfortable with. This is what they did when they were youngest. They want to keep this pronunciation anyway. So, yes, Eleni, doctors, scholars, it's just an unusual way of saying it. So I don't know where, to me, this almost says that we're using old-fashioned Hebrew pronunciation because the modern people are not connected to Hebrew at all, and therefore this is as good as any other, or in fact, reminds them of their grandparents. But I have no idea. It's just a theory. If you look at what constitutes a family in 1965, unsurprisingly, so The Seder starts off, there's a man leading the Seder, looking kind of a bit like the Joker from Batman, really, glaring across at, I guess those are his sons and either a daughter or his wife, I'm not sure which. But it's kind of a male-dominated Seder. By the end, by the time we get to the third cup, there's just 3 men in the picture. The women have gone to bed. Whereas in the Maxwell House 2011 Haggadah, we have a girl asking Manish Tana. There's not any other photos, no photos of a family at all inside the text. The covers do have different pictures each year, but inside there's no other family. But clearly, we're getting to more gender equality and allowing women to be more active participants in the Seder. This was really weird. I don't have an explanation or an answer at all, but they've gained an extra item on their Seder plate. So, I mean, you can just look, there's 5 items on the 1965 Seder plate and 6 items in the 2011 Seder plate. Right? We all have I guess, a zra, the shank bone, charoset is whatever, the mortar, maro is a bit of herbs, the karpas is your parsley or potato, or not potato, or potato or whatever you're dipping, celery, and beitzah zahap or egg. But in the new version of the Seder plate, they have not only maro, but also chazeret, which is horseradish. So, no. Growing up, I thought maro was horseradish. Later on, I realized maro can be lettuce, romaine lettuce. And so the Maxwell House Haggadah has put both maro and chazeret. So they've got lettuce and maro. Now, there's no place in the Haggadah where it says eat this one or that one. It doesn't address why they've got both. I found that in the Rabbi Kolach, in his book of Why, he says that even though the same thing, some people have them as separate things. Right, chazeret, pronounced chazeret, carries the same symbolism as maro. It's placed in one of the 6 compartments of the Seder tray. The vegetable selected for the chazeret is cucumber, watercress, radish, or any other vegetable that tends to become bitter. It's related to the biblical verse, you shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Bitter herbs is in the plural, and therefore you need to have maro and chazeret. Not compelling. There is a machloket about which one to use, but I don't know. Oh yeah, thank you, Michael. The salt water should be on the Seder plate. Of course, that's the 6th item. So I don't know why they put chazir. I don't know why they changed a perfectly good thing to make it more confusing. But I thought that was very interesting. And yes, I don't know why they left the salt water out, right? But there's no room for salt water on either of their Seder plates. So you do see on the cover of the back cover of the Haggadah, you see now by the 2000s it's an intergenerational hug. It's not the father teaching or the father and mother teaching their children, but it's really the grandparents passing. This is something the old people do when trying to pass on to the next generation. Yes, I mean you don't have to have a Seder plate at all, but yes. Anyway, so we see now that kind of the kids or the parents of the kids are perhaps a little bit losing touch, and they need the older generation to come and pass down the Seder to their grandchildren. Again, that's a great thing. The Gemara somewhere says, where Kol Lamed Ben Bitul Torah Kiddushin, right? Gemara Kiddushin. Kol Lamed Ben Bitul Torah Kilo Shema Mahar Sinai, Kibla Mahar Sinai. If you teach your grandchild Torah, it's as if they heard it from Mount Sinai. It's a great thing that you're passing it on, across the generations, and it makes the Seder better in every way. But it's also interesting that that's the advertising. They've gone from flappers in the 20s with their fancy hats and hairdos to elderly Babis and Zadis passing on the tradition to their grandchildren. So it's a different audience they are pitching to. So now I just want to end with kind of a rhetorical question. Basically, not quite true, but partially true. The reason we have coffee at Pesach today is because Maxwell House made their Haggadah. If they wouldn't have made their Haggadah, if they would have got a hechsher from some rabbi who today we've forgotten about, who said it's not kitniot, maybe there'd be more chumras. Someone would come along and say, no, I think it is kitniot, and they'd quote earlier sources. Maybe we wouldn't be having coffee on Pesach. So for that alone, I'm very grateful to the Maxwell House Haggadah. And just very quickly, kind of as a joke and kind of not, are peanuts kitniot? Now, peanuts are called nut, so you might think they grow on a tree, but actually they are a bean. In real life, they're a bean. So Rav Moshe has I don't know why I put this here. I would have got all messed up, and I'm sure it's my fault. But anyway, Maxwell House made this. If you saw, I did not, but if you saw The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, set in the 50s in New York, so Maxwell House made a Haggadah in pink instead of traditional blue, with all sorts of things to tie in with the TV show, which is kind of cute. And harps back to that they were around then when she was doing her thing in the 50s. Maxwell House was there. So I want to say our peanuts kidneyot. Rav Moshe Feinstein famously wrote a tshuva in, I guess, the 1960s, where like it's a column and a half about whether peanuts are kidneyot, and he says absolutely not. They're definitely not kidneyot. He's replying to somebody who challenged him and said they were kidneyot. I can't read the Hebrew, so I'm just going to read the translation, which was done by ChatGPT, by Copilot. Therefore, peanuts were also not forbidden in many places as mentioned. Right? He starts off by saying, in Europe we used to eat peanuts. Peanuts are not kitniyah on Pesach. In a place where there's no such custom, one should not forbid, because in such matters one should not be stringent, as stated in Chok Yaakov. And for those who have a specific custom not to eat peanuts, it's forbidden for them to eat peanuts, but out of doubt one should not forbid. Therefore, it is appropriate to give kosher certification that no chametz was mixed in, and those who do not observe this prohibition may eat them. So I've seen the kosher certification is given for peanut oil for this reason. Rav Moshe Feinstein, who was one of the greatest American rabbis in America of the 20th century, without a doubt, he says unequivocally that peanuts and peanut oil is not kitniot, may be used on Pesach. If you look on the OU website, though, now they say in Europe, different communities have different customs about peanuts. Some consider them to be kitniot, while others ate peanuts on Passover. Many years ago, we used to say it was kosher. Peanut oil was good. However, in recent years, we've stopped certifying peanut oil as kosher, and we can't recommend that people whose custom is to use peanut oil use uncertified peanut oil, and therefore you can't have peanut oil anymore on Pesach. So, in contrast to Maxwell House Coffee, where they got not a nobody, but a relatively unknown rabbi to say that that coffee is not kitniot, and it's remained that way. Peanuts used to be not kitniot. The O used to give them a hechsher, and now they've become kitniot. So I wonder what would have happened. I asked AI, what would have happened if the peanut company would have produced a Haggadah for Pesach? Would be eating peanut butter this year on our matzah? That's it. Thank you very much. Next week, I want to look at some of the saddest Haggadot, the Holocaust Haggadahs, the Soviet Haggadahs, and maybe some early Israeli Haggadahs. I'm not exactly sure, but I want to end with, I don't want to end with sad, but anyway, I want to look at more recent Haggadot. So I'll see you then. And then if you look on the website, there is one share for Yom HaShoah, and there's another series for the summer you can sign up for now. Thank you very much. See you next week.